This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. You know, Yuki, I'm pretty sure if you had a VPN, you could have stopped Pegasus from reading your cards with his magical eye. Okay, that's a lie. But something like the millennial eye ain't a fantasy. The internet is full of surveillance, web limitation, and data mining happening right under your nose. But thankfully with Surfshark VPN, you do have an easy one-for-all solution, so go find your Cecilia elsewhere, Pegasus. Across many different products, Windows, Android, or Apple, with the click of a button, Surfshark turns you into an anonymous and hard-to-track user, giving you more freedom on the internet, keeps you away from prying eyes, or eye, and prevents companies from doing things like geo-blocking, where video and streaming services limit your library simply because of where you live. With Surfshark, that's all a non-issue. Start up their service, you choose your location, refresh the page, and there you go, your favorite show that you couldn't watch before. Like the imprisoned Grandpa Power Hour. And those that use the link in the description below and enter the special code Johnny will not only get 83% off their initial order, but the next 3 months are also completely free. As always, thanks to Surfshark VPN for the sponsor. Now let's continue on with the show. In 1996, Kazuki Takahashi would create Yu-Gi-Oh! For Weekly Shonen Jump, centering on a young boy who, after solving the puzzle of an ancient relic given to him by his grandfather, would inherit the soul of the being dwelling inside that would often help Yugi solve dilemmas by means of various games. I'm talking stabbing money on your hands with knives and setting people on fire. This story goes places, but one of the most popular games showcased in the manga was that of Magic and Wizards, later renamed Duel Monsters, where players using dedicated cards could summon monsters and what have you to reduce their opponent's life points to 0. This game would become so popular that in 1999, the card game would be made a reality, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Official card game, and in 2002, that game will be brought over to the West under Yu-Gi-Oh! The trading card game. Earlier in my day, I was always confused about the different naming conventions between the East and the West. The game was the same across regions, so why was one called the OCG and the other the TCG? And then I found out Eastern markets tended to get brand new cards much earlier than Western markets, which heavily affected the current meta, not to mention those cards just being straight up illegal in Western games, and all those promos exclusive to special weekly Shonen Jump magazines. So to help clear things up, 2 metas were created for the East and West respectively. Even today, it's still a thing from what I can tell, because there are cards that still haven't seen release in other regions, necessitating the continued need for different metas. Card games can be weird and very expensive, but this card game was pretty simple on the surface. Using a deck of at least 40 cards, it was you versus your opponent in an attempt in draining each other's life points to 0, using a combination of monster, spell, and trap cards. At the beginning of the game, you chose who got to go first with either a coin toss, a roll of the dice, or good old-fashioned rock, paper, scissors. Rochambeau is also preferred way.
Oh my god!
Both players would then draw 5 cards. Back then, the player who went first got to draw an extra card, but that's not part of the current format anymore, and I'm surprised it took them so long to stop that because, well, they already had the advantage of going first, so getting an extra card over the opponent was like rubbing salt on the wound. Anyway, monster cards were your main source of attack and defense. Once summoned to the field, they could attack your opponent's monsters, the monster with the higher attack being the victor. Or if the opponent's monster is in defense mode, they could destroy the monster if their attack was higher than the defending monster's defense. Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't afraid to make your ass do basic math, so get that brain going or whip out that calculator if you're a coward. If your opponent had no monsters when you entered the battle phase, you could use your monsters to attack an opponent's life points directly and really get the subtractions going. There were normal monsters that had no extra effects and were just glorified beatsticks or fodder for tribute summons, which were larger monsters that required you to sacrifice a smaller monster or monsters to even get on the field. Then you had your effect monsters that came in all shapes and sizes and colors that triggered certain effects under various conditions. Things to help you fish out larger monsters without needing to tribute at all. You can damage your opponent's life points directly without needing to battle, or completely turn the duel on its head with crazy ass effects. Spell cards marked blue or turquoise, one of those two, could instantly cause certain effects to activate, letting you beef up a monster's stats or bring them back from the graveyard or banish the monster completely, hell, sometimes control an opponent's monster outright. Then there were trap cards, which normally couldn't be activated on the same turn you set them on the field, but once conditions were met, they could turn the tide in a heartbeat, interrupting and negating your opponent's play or changing the landscape of the duel to suit your needs. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a card game that required strategy, good deck synergy, and most importantly, luck, because it is not at all uncommon for you to absolutely brick your opening hand and get shat on in the opening minute of the duel. This is true now, and especially back then. And that is the basic gist of the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. In this video, much like that old Pokemon trading card game video I made way back in 2012, this video is more about my personal experiences growing up with the game and a look back, you could say. That hopefully won't be as awkward and full of long pauses as that Pokemon video was. It was still new at the time, so I am shotgunning most of the script. Here's hoping I don't run around in circles too much. Yeah, it's a retrospective in celebration of the game turning 20 years old over here in America. Fucking 20 years! I have not been playing the game for that long. I'm close to 19, maybe 18 and a half, as I'll get into here. But because this video is a personal look back, talking about my memories and all that, for this kind of video, I'm all about also hearing what you guys know about the Yu-Gi-Oh series. So in the comments below, please let me know. When did you get started? If you got started at all, what are some of your favorite decks? Do you keep playing? Did you stop playing? And why did you stop playing? It's all about like celebrating the memories of Yu-Gi-Oh, or maybe detesting it. Maybe you're a little sour, but you lost a tournament at one point or another. I don't know. So do that in the comments whenever you want. I don't know how long this video is going to be because, again, I'm just rambling my ass off for this one. So, without further ado, I guess we should talk about my earliest days with the card. Yeah, this is a nice glove, right? Ben got me this a couple of months ago in preparation for this video. They got it at an Etsy shop. And it's cool. It's all magnets, and the star chips actually come off. I'm not doing that, though, because they're a pain in the ass to put back in. But, Ben, thank you very much for the gift. I appreciate it, dude. Okay, so before we actually get started, I can hear my cats crying in the bedroom, so I'm going to go let them out. So I apologize if at some point or other you see a random tail roaming around here. All right, so the exact specifics on when I was first introduced to the card game are a little hazy, but I believe it was early 2003 is when I was first introduced to the card game. This was like the second half of my 10th grade adventure in high school. And it was in the middle of a class. I noticed a couple of my friends, I think this is after the class, maybe the class is getting ready to go. I saw a couple of my friends gather around a table, and I thought maybe it's something Game Boy related, because Game Boy trading and link cables, that was still a thing back then. And maybe it was maybe you're playing poker, or maybe the Pokemon trading card game was making a comeback. It wasn't that. It was something completely new, something that I haven't seen before. I saw them using these cards that had like these brown labels in the back with a swirly image, and people were like flipping them up or drawing cards, and I was just staring, wondering, what exactly is this?
Monkey!
And then they told me it was Yukio. Never heard of it. I had no idea what that was, and all right, I guess I will just be witness to what's going on here. I had no idea what was going on here, but it looked like they were enjoying themselves. They were having a few laughs, and what is high school if not trying to generate or at least be a part of some sort of clique? And while I had a couple of friends already by the middle of 10th grade, I wanted to, be a part of something a little larger, and Yu-Gi-Oh seemed to be like that gateway of making sure, yeah, I'm one of the cool nerds, I'm hip, I'm with it. I can't afford weed. So I started to look into the game, and thanks to the help of a couple of my friends, I believe it was Matt, it was Charles, it was Lamont, a couple of guys gave me a couple of cards, like pity cards, to get my foot in the door, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I had no semblance of deck synergy. My deck was gargantuan. My deck was about this thick, no sleeves, and the cards just did whatever the hell they want. I had no idea what I was doing. I think I played things on the field and something happens, and the amount of times I was told, no, you can't do that. That's an illegal move you did right there. My God, I lost count after 36,000. I was trash. I was trash for a while. It wouldn't be for a bit before I learned how the game ended up working. But I did, again, have my foot in the door. And now it was a matter of following up on it. And what I decided to do that was not very long afterwards. I decided, okay, you know what? I think I am going to start learning the ins and outs of this game. So not too long after that, I would find myself going to a KB toy store back when those were still around and thriving, I guess, for a couple more years. And there they had these boxes of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. These were structure decks. I think I have just one somewhere around here. There's my cat's running around again. These structure decks is basically like this. Now these were pre-made decks that had everything that you need to just get immediately into the game. Now whether the deck was good or not was highly subjective, but that's not the point. These were your gateway into getting into the game proper. Not only did you have like a deck of 40 cards, which was the minimum, it also, I believe, I'm not sure if it's here. Yeah. Okay, yeah, they still do. they had this. Probably the most important piece of the structure deck box. I'm not even talking about like the staple cards or all the important cards. It had this. It had the rule book. And finally, at last, I was able to learn the in and outs and how this game worked. You hear my cat running all over the fucking place. And now I can see how cards are supposed to work, how monster cards are supposed to drain life points, how magic and trap cards are supposed to turn the tides at my beck and call. And I won't have to be so much of a dipshit now in the middle of games. So my first few structure decks, I think there were only 3 around the time. No, I think there were 4, but I think we only had 3 because it was myself, it was my brother Mark, and I think Elliot was also getting into the game, but he was only like 6 or 7 years old around this time. I remember my first structure deck being structure deck Joey. And then I believe Mark got structure deck Kaiba, and Elliot got structure deck Yugi. Mark and Elliot did not play the game as often as I did because I was in high school. I had a bunch of friends who were already playing the game, and I think that wasn't quite the same case with them. So what this often meant is that their decks often went neglected, prime for the picking. It's like, you don't need your blue eyes? I'm going to take your blue eyes. Some other shit. Don't tell them I did that, though. Oh, no, maybe they're watching. I've already caught myself out. But what essentially happened is that I combined all 3 decks to make something of a deck. Again, no synergy, but it was more capable than my previous attempt, if you could even call it that. And soon enough, I had something that worked, something that was somewhat consistent. It wasn't a great deck, but I was learning how the game worked, and that was the most important thing. And now, suddenly, I was playing with the other guys every high school morning, basically, because Monday through Friday, I would end up leaving the house around 7 o'clock. And no, it would about like 6 o'clock, 6:15 in the morning, so I can catch the early bus and be at the school around 7 o'clock in the morning in time for morning breakfast over at the cafeteria and like an hour to ourselves in the cafeteria just to play Duel Monsters. And that was a good part of my high school years. And more often than not, it was the best part of the day because, you know, school sucked. Obviously, you got to do what you can to get better grades, to get ready to go to college and all that sort of thing. But in terms of just winding down, the morning of every class was like the best part of the day because everybody was there. Everybody that played the game was always there, same time, same place, and we just shoot the shit and play Duel Monsters for a good part of the morning. And after school was also a time when we just met up and played games afterwards because, I mean, not everybody could stay for the entire thing, but sometimes we would just hang out after class and just Duel Monsters there for like 30, 40 minutes. Not terribly long. We do want to go back home, you know, play video games and shit. And sometimes one of my favorite things that we used to do is that we would head to, back then in downtown Philadelphia, it was known as the Gallery. I think it's like Fashion 1 now, or District 1, whatever the hell it's called. That used to be called the Gallery, and that strip area, there's like an underground mall that connected to the regional rail system in Philadelphia, the SEPTA regional rail. And there was a big ass wide open space with a lot of these tables and these like stalls that you're supposed to sit down and use when you're waiting for the train. More often than not, our clique, or at least friends of friends, would head down there and we played Duel Monsters there. Like it was like this rural underground suburban regional rail like backdrop for card games, and it was so cool. Like we did these large round table duels that took forever because they always take forever and the rules were very hit and miss, but it was always a blast just heading out there like at the end of the week and just duel with a bunch of friends. And later we would also go to the Bourse building at 5th and Marcus, downtown Philadelphia. And I'm not sure what that place is like now because I haven't been there in so long. But in the bottom floor area, there was a daycare, and then there was a bunch of tables that were set up for like cafeteria needs, in case, because the Bourse building was like it was a food court that was meant to attract like all of the like business folks that worked in Center City. And you would, you know, get your very expensive food in the first floor and then go down the bottom floor and use the tables to eat your food. More often than not, we just use it for Duel Monsters. It was me or a bunch of high school friends there and a few other kids from different high schools that would meet up there and just shoot the shit with card games. And that was pretty much how it went down in high school. And over the course of a few months and the course of a few years, I'll finally start learning how to make a deck that has a consistent theme And I think my earliest deck that I ever made that I could identify as with a certain label was Fiends. It was an aggro beatdown. It was heavily inspired by a deck that my friend Matt used to run, because back then he had a bias towards Fiend monsters, demons especially, because that was his thing. And lower level high aggro beatdown sticks, because back then, you know, we didn't have like synchros or XZs or all this other crazy shit that can just fill the board in like one turn. I mean, you could do that if you had the right kind of combo and a shitload of money. But back then it was more about your low level monsters carrying the weight until you can get the big guns out for like the finale, or maybe you're running a burn deck and just directly damaging your opponent's life points without you doing anything else necessary. So my first deck was heavily inspired by Matt's, and it would be basically like some sort of fiend control. I had a lot of fiends. I would mill my deck to get fiends in the graveyard, and then I'd whip out the Dark Necro Fear, and then I also had like Dark Ruler Hades. It was Hades, but it was Hades, upper deck censorship. But that was the first deck I remember ever truly constructing that had a central theme to it. But like a lot of other decks around that time, it wasn't long before I started like knowing about the splash cards or the staples. These were cards that no matter what deck you were running, it could be any sort of gimmicky specialty deck, Exodia, clown control, chaos control, you had to have these cards in your deck to even stand a chance. And I can't name all of them, but it was like Change of Heart, Graceful Charity, Pot of Greed, Imperial Order, all that, Monster Reborn, I think that's like the big one. These were must-haves, staples, again. And this is when I found out that in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not just a matter of having good deck synergy, knowing how mechanics work for all types of monster types, all types of deck types and matchups, what have you. It's also a money game. And if you're going to make it in Yu-Gi-Oh, at least at a intermediate to advanced level of play, you got to have some money. And where did that lead me, a broke-ass sophomore going into junior high school student that had no job, no source of income outside of a couple of bucks that he would get from his parents every now and then? They didn't leave me with much to leave with, so I would end up not being able to get a lot of those splash cards through normal means. So more often than not, we'd have to rely on each other to get these decks and these cards and all that sort of thing. And a big part of what made Yu-Gi-Oh so thrilling for me, it was the trade scene, because if you couldn't get the cards by yourself, and you know that was the case, because you know it requires a lot of money, and then even then you're buying packs. You know, you're heading to card shops or your Walmart or your Target for these packs, and you gotta hope you pull these things off. You gotta hope you pull the right card out, and yet that's not always gonna happen. More often than not, you're not gonna get the card that you want. I'm saying more often than not a lot of this video. That's what happens when I don't script this shit. But so we had to rely on each other and like show us the goods. Like I may not have the card that I want, but I may have the card that you want. And we just trade binders. We looked through our stuff. Everything was nice and neat in a wrapped game. And that's how I remember getting a lot of the cards that I needed personally for the kind of decks that I wanted to run. Because sometimes I went with the flow, sometimes I didn't. But then after a while, I was like, enough, if I really want to make this work out, I'm going to need that Fiber Jar. I'm going to need that Yatagarasu. And I'm definitely going to need that Pot of Greed. Because I don't think Pot of Greed was that common of a card just yet. Everything, if it wasn't in a structure deck, you had to get it in an individual pack. And you had to know, or at least hope, that you were close to a store that had those kind of packs available to you. Now, for me personally, I was lucky in that regard, because we couldn't always go to a Walmart or a Target or a KB Toys, as I mentioned earlier, because they were in inconvenient spots. They were in malls. You had to travel for a bit. Around the corner from my old house, there was a card store, though. It's not strictly a card store. It was, I don't know what the fuck it was. It was like a novelty shop. It had a lot of knickknacks, bric-a-brac, and all that. But they sold Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And I think at some point, this mom and pop store knew what they had, because they would always have a restock of every set available around that time. When there was a new set that came out, they would have that set. Maybe not immediately, but just a couple of days afterwards. So I would go there a lot of times just to see if they have new cards. And I would like buy them in droves whenever I could get the chance. I was never able to buy like a full box. I mean, that was the dream back then. Like if for a kid growing up with you around that time, that was a dream. It's like if you can get an entire fucking box. I had this box for a long ass time. Raging Tempest. I don't even know if this is a good set or not. This is like post. This is when I stopped playing the games. Zodiac. I remember Zodiacs being a thing for a while. Anyway, that was the dream to have. Like if you're gonna buy an entire box, you were guaranteed to get some good card. And if not the card that you want, it's a card that you can sell at a higher price and then use that money to try again. Because that's what it was. It was a circle, man. It was like a fucking, it was like a Mobius strip, an infinite symbol like they used to kill the Leviathan in that Leviathan arc of the anime. Sometimes though, I guess that mom and pop store also had kids themselves. They would sell individual cards. Then you had to pay a little higher for them because you're paying for a specific card right then and there, not risking RNG, so they gouged the price up in exchange for that. But it helped because there were a couple of times where I was able to get one card or two that I needed for this particular deck, and I was able to bypass all the RNG bullshit. It just cost me a little more money. Thankfully, they weren't like extravagantly priced because you got to keep the business running. You don't want to scare the kids away because those kids are your source of income. But man, the journey to continue like finding the right cards for that deck was like the most experimental part of my time with Yu-Gi-Oh, because like on top of needing money to get the cards that I wanted, I would also at some points or another find stores that had Japanese cards. And as I was saying earlier, there was the OCG and the TCG, and the OCG had cards that weren't available yet in America. So what I would do is that I would just use the Japanese cards as proxies to see if that kind of deck would work inside my TCG deck, which is just for shits and giggles, because I couldn't like legitimately use it. It was an illegal deck. It's like I'm flipping a Needleworm face up and they're asking, where the fuck did you get that? Needleworm is not in the TCG. That's illegal, motherfucker. I was like, yeah, but it's in Japanese, and Japanese letters are cool. I actually really like a lot of the Japanese cards I end up collecting. A lot, they're tarnished as shit though. They've definitely seen better days. I've had them for almost 20 years. And the Evil Dark Magician is probably my favorite of the bunch, outside of like the Dark Magician Girl and other shit like that. And then I think at my lowest points, it's not necessarily done for Yu-Gi-Oh, but it did benefit my need to collect Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I was 15 years old, 15 going on 16, and I ended up taking a job as a temporary barback for a nightclub, completely under the table. Probably very illegal, but I knew people. So I would go to this nightclub, spend late nights helping the bar stock their supplies and all that sort of shit, and I would get tips. I would get tip money, and that was like, that's Yu-Gi-Oh money. I can't, like I'm exhausted. I'm heading back home at like 3 or 4 in the morning on a school night, and I'm like, this is gonna fucking suck. But man, I can't wait to get back home from class that day, because I'm heading straight back to that store and spending all that money on packs. And that's how I was able to like really start getting in like the scene of like having the cards that you need to make the decks that you wanted. And like it was good. It didn't last very long. I think I was only in that position for maybe 2-3 weeks before I just couldn't manage anymore. My sleep schedule was so fucked, and it's like I don't want to do this anymore. Like I love Yu-Gi-Oh, I love money, but I can't keep doing this anymore. My sleep sucks and I feel like shit. So wouldn't recommend doing that for all of you up and coming youngsters there if you happen to be watching this video. Believe it or not, the thing that sort of jumpstart me getting into like the intermediate to the advanced scene, not like the regional advanced scene, but like this is where I started taking the game pretty seriously. It was one day after school. I take the subway back home from high school because it was just ultimately faster and you avoid all the traffic. And getting on the stop, there was this Ziploc bag on the seat of the train that I was heading into. It was an empty train. We were one of the first folks there. And inside that Ziploc bag were Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I'm guessing some kid dropped them or maybe forgot them, which sucks, but in Philadelphia subway, that's easy picking. And I'm not ashamed to say I took those cards for myself because I was young, and of course I'm gonna take the fucking cards. I'm not gonna turn to the police. The police might be a Yu-Gi-Oh player. He's gonna take those cards for himself. But Inside that Ziploc bag full of cards was a lot of rare shit at the time. A lot of stuff from current sets. So it was like Magic Cylinder, there was like Gemini Elves, a lot of Labyrinth of Nightmare, Legacy of Darkness, not Metal Raid. Metal Raid is pretty old. Pharaonic Guardian too. There were a sizable number of cards that were considered viable, splash, staple cards that can go in any deck if you use them right. And from that point, the rest is history. Like, okay, some act of God, or maybe it was the pharaoh inside the Millennium Puzzle himself has given me these cards. What do I do? All right, so let's take advantage of this. I might as well. And then soon after that, my first real deck would soon come together, and it would slowly evolve into what you guys may know as the Chaos Control deck. Yeah, it was called Chaos Control, which as a Sonic fan, I was like, that's beautiful naming. There's a reason why it was called that, because starting with it was the Invasion of Chaos set, the meta would drastically change forever with the kind of cards that set brought in, like Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, and Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. Like, those are badass fucking names with some badass fucking cards. Oh my, I love Chaos Emperor Dragon. I just love looking at that beast. Like, he was something else. But with that set, and with what I knew beforehand and the cards I already had, I was able to start making what was known as the Chaos Control deck, thanks to me consistently like keeping up with the card lists and all sort of shit. Help with my uncle, who also had a set of cards. He also handed me a couple of cards for my birthday at one point. And again, that was a big thing that led me to building the deck that I ended up constructing. Before I knew it, I had a pretty fucking competitive deck. I was consistently winning duels in high school along with Matt, Charles, and a few other guys there. And not that we were like the talk of the town or anything like that. It's a children's card game in high school. But I was winning duels. Like, I was consistently winning duels. And then the ban list happened. So around that time, that was when the first ban list took effect, and all of those high-powered cards. We were now playing two different formats. There was the traditional format, where if you don't like the ban list, you can stick to the traditional format, where you're still only allowed to use a certain number of cards that were just obnoxiously powerful. There was always a limited list in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, since its inception. Like, you could only play like one Raigeki or one Dark Hole, one Monster Reborn, one Pot of Greed, and all that, because they were just overpowered cards. But the meta got so inflated with these overpowered cards that something had to be done. So the advanced format was created to rectify this. And in the advanced format, some cards were straight up unplayable. They were banned. You could not use them. These cards could not be in your deck whatsoever if you're playing advanced format. And I remember there being some pushback in high school because of that, because a lot of kids went out of their way to get some of these cards, and now you're saying that we can't use them. But we did come to agree to use the advanced format because, I love that era of Yu-Gi-Oh! I do. In fact, I, among a lot of other of my friends that still play the game today, still like to do GOAT format, because that was the name of the format around that time. It's 2004, 2005, around that, around the first ban list. I like that format the most because I'm an old man who hates change, yes, but I just like how fast duels were there. But however, the duels were also kind of samey, there were different deck variances, sure, but they were all kind of converging into a similar synergy, a similar theme that got a little boring. So we figured with the advanced format, we can spice things up a bit. And after that, Chaos Control was kind of dead, and we just branched on to other things. So now that my camera is recording again, thank you very much, camera, I can get back to what I was saying. Towards the end of high school and the beginning of college, I would start planting the seeds for what would basically be my final deck for the GOAT format as we know it now. It was the Apprentice Monarch build, where my main source of field control and all that sort of thing was Monarchs, but I would use Apprentice Magician and all that to mill my deck and thin out the deck so it can make it easier to draw those cards specifically. It's one of my favorite decks that I ever made. Before that, I also had a thing for the Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys. I still have the original card in my deck book, actually. And I just liked the card art. I liked the effect. It wasn't viable around that time. It wouldn't be until way later where they started making all sorts of things centered on Sacred Phoenix Ignatus. That's one thing I can compliment Yu-Gi-Oh! Now compared to then, is just how viable a lot of card themes are, where there's no one deck that you absolutely must run 24/7. Maybe that's the case, I don't know. I'm horribly out of touch with the current Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta. Maybe it's exactly like that. But from what I've seen from an outsider's perspective who has history with the game in its earlier days, it looks like there's an environment where a lot of other deck types could run, and I'm really happy to see that, because if I'm ever thinking about getting into the game now, like I always wanted to make a dedicated Blue Eyes deck, because I just love Blue Eyes White Dragon as a concept, as a creature. You know, that was like one of the main head honchos of the anime around that time, and I just like to be able to make a deck around him and let it could do all sorts of shit with all kinds of support. That is great, and it's now possible in today's environment, and it wasn't so back then. So, while keeping to the theme of Monarchs, I was able to build something that was still like getting a lot of results. And at this point, in the beginning of college, I would meet Russ, who you've seen in the Balan Wonderworld video and the Kingdom Hearts stuff. Russ is one of my best friends. I would take a bullet for that guy. We're close. Oh shit. Friendship my ass. I mentioned Russ, the friendship bracelet breaks in half. What the shit? That's foreboding as shit. But anyway, in college, I met Russ and my roommate Jacob. And the thing that I always told myself, because my first stint at college was not good. Like it was a big money sink that I'm still paying for today, if you can believe it or not. And I always make the joke that Russ and Jacob were some of the most expensive friends I ever met, because I was in so much debt after spending 2 years in that place. But the experiences I was able to experience in that college was fucking fantastic, and a lot of it was centered on Yu-Gi-Oh! Because around this time, on top of building what I thought to be a really powerful deck for myself, I was seriously contemplating the tournament scene. Beforehand, the only sort of tournament experience that I had was this one Yu-Gi-Oh! Event that I don't remember the exact year or month this was, but it was an Oxford Valley Mall. That was like, it was a bring your deck, duel one time, and we'll give you this tiny ass Millennium Puzzle pendant that you could wear that I quickly lost. And you can sign your name on this book that is probably being used for bonfire fodder right now. But it was a big deal because the tournament, like I want to participate in some of these things. Again, Yu-Gi-Oh! Hit me different than the Pokemon trading card game that I said before in that video. That was a game that I collected because, much like the games themselves, I collected because I liked collecting Pokemon. And despite the fact that there was a game attached to that, I didn't care for the game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was different because, on top of loving the monster art, the card art in general, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Even now still has phenomenally well-crafted monster art for like every single deck type you can possibly imagine. I just liked looking at the cards, but mechanically, the game looked very interesting to me. Yeah, you gotta do basic math and all sort of thing, attack and defense, subtracting life points here and there. Oh, good lord, if a monster had 1850 attack points, like, fuck me, man. I wanted to pay more respect to this game than I did with Pokemon. I didn't just want it to be another Pokemon TCG. I wanted to actively try this game out, and it just worked. It's just one of those things that you just slip into very comfortably, and you just go on from there. You know, no other card game has done that for me. And there were attempts. There were other card games around this time that I tried, but I couldn't. Like everyone in college, outside of Russ and Jacob, they played Magic the Gathering. And Russ also played Magic. He tried to teach me Magic for a bit. It wasn't working. It just wasn't clicking with me. I was already up to my neck in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I just didn't want to split my attention to another card game. There was also Duel Masters, I think, was another card game. This is earlier. This is in high school. Duel Masters, Duel Monsters. That was not subtle at all. And I remember that being a thing for maybe a week or a month in high school, and it quickly faded out. Nobody was playing that game. I think just Yu-Gi-Oh was just more interesting. I don't know. I'm speaking as someone who doesn't know. Maybe Duel Masters has popped off tremendously, and there's some large fucking meta that I'm completely unaware of. You know, it cured cancer, some other shit. But I did not know about it, and I don't want to know about it. I don't really care. Yu-Gi-Oh as a game, again, it on top of just being able to have fun and just play with my friends and all that sort of thing, it was just something that mechanically I understood, and one that I thought I was going to be playing for the rest of my life, basically. And as we'll see, that's not the case. I have my reasons, but it was just a fun time that I loved playing with my friends, and it gave me the excuse to travel, essentially, because, like I said, in college, I was considering the tournament scene, and this is where I was starting to do locals. And if that wasn't at a dedicated card shop, which there were a few around the area, to be fair, it was at like a Walmart. Walmart would sometimes host locals, and we would go there as a posse. We'd spend the night before, like in our dorms, like talking decks, just shooting the shit, combining cards and getting ideas of what we'd be able to run, what the current meta is like, and how we can counter that. And then we'd go to the place, and then we run amok. I never won first place. I've gotten close. I've gotten top 3 a couple of times. And, you know, that just makes you feel good, you know, the fact that there's something that you built can get you this kind of result. But after enough of those, we went to our first regional tournament, and this was in Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't that terribly far from where the college was, but we made it a road trip for the weekend to go down to Columbus for the regional. I did terrible in that one. I think I didn't even break top 32. I didn't get very far at all because, again, especially around that time, Yukio was a money game, and some of those top cards were obnoxiously expensive. No matter where you looked, back in the day, I used to venture. What was it? I think it was Toy Wiz or Toy Biz or something like that. That's where you could buy individual cards, but they gouge you, especially if they knew this deck was part of something greater. They fucking hiked the shit out of that card. But, you know, for like a couple of birthdays, I would use the birthday money that I would get to get a couple of cards, and that's all she wrote. Locals and regionals were also like the time where you could flex your card sleeves or your deck mats, because, you know, you were considered the cool kid if you had like a custom made deck mat that had it wasn't like your typical Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game produced by Mattel sort of shit, like it had Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. No, there were folks that I remember one that had a Shadow the Hedgehog deck mat, like the actual Shadow the Hedgehog graphic, because that game was new around this time. There were a couple of other things, a lot of anime-inspired deck mats. One of my favorites, and one that I use repeatedly even today, is this one. It's not even Yu-Gi-Oh related. I just like the art. Can you tell I have a type? Maybe rock the single-colored card sleeves that have a different kind of material so that they scoop out of your hand easily, so they're not sliding all over the place. Maybe you had a little extra money to spend. You had like those fancy graphics on your card sleeves. It could be like a badass dragon. It could be something from the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise itself, or it could be just some big titted anime woman. I don't know. I got a couple of those actually somewhere around here. I got this for myself, and then I use it to gross my friends out because I love seeing the reactions. I also have my ultimate rare Queen's Knight taped to the front of my main deck box. This is something I copied from my uncle because he had something similar done with one of his deck boxes. I think his in the front of the card was an Obelisk the Tormentor, one of the Egyptian god cards. That was kind of like the cool thing to have around that time because, you know, they were in the show, like they're the end all be all cards. But then you get the cards and you see in the bottom of the card there's this card cannot be used in a duel. It's like fuck. They don't have any effects. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna lie and say just to go do the anime effects? Like, that's horseshit. But, you know, you're still one of the cool kids if they have the Egyptian god cards. And hopefully you didn't get fucked over by getting a fake over at, like, again, those online stores that I mentioned earlier. Like, I did get fucked over one time by ordering a set of Egyptian god cards, and they were absolutely fake. It's like, fuck me, man. Fake Yu-Gi-Oh cards were also pretty rampant around this time, and they fucked me up especially. I didn't get a lot of them because why would I spend money on fake cards when I can just get the real ones that will, you know, I can actually use. But I remember some of them making me laugh with some of their broken as hell English descriptions. My favorite was probably Summon Skull. It wasn't Summon Skull though. It was Call from Monster. I don't remember the exact specifics, but I remember the description being with great with great power to tempt your mind. Very proud of the power. It's like, okay, good. Like that's great for call for monster. Okay, that was full of that shit. I absolutely love this. If you have any other examples of fake Yu-Gi-Oh monster cards, please let me know in the comments and what the description entailed, because I love laughing my ass off over the broken English and translation of these cards. It was great. It was also here where I learned one of the sinister tricks of the trade when it comes to guaranteeing getting something good from Yu-Gi-Oh packs, because I think I have it around here somewhere. I do. I still have this son of a bitch. This is a scale, a weight scale. And what you could do with this is that you can take a pack. It doesn't matter if it was still in the cardboard, if it was still in its foil. You could place it on top of the scale. And if there was a slight weight variance, I'm talking about maybe by a 0.1 gram, maybe 0.2, that would tell you that there was a foil inside that card. Could be ultra rare, could be a super rare, secret, ultimate, I don't know. But that would let you know that, hey, if there's nothing in this pack, don't buy this pack. This one has something in there, buy that pack. And sometimes it'd be what we're looking for, but other times it was just a foil that we didn't really care about, but we could sell it back. And that was the really important thing. That was like, it's like black market Yu-Gi-Oh! We're talking there. And this they didn't let you do this a lot. Like, there were a lot of Walmarts didn't care because we're getting your money anyway. There were a few card shops that prohibited this completely, maybe because they were doing it themselves. I would also visit message boards around this time. Pojo is probably the biggest one that I can think of. It's the only one I could think of because it's the only one that mattered. And Pojo, besides having like, you know, the card of the day reviews that would update frequently, I loved reading those card reviews. The message boards were filled with all sorts of discussion and discourse over deck builds, what's currently hot, what's not, what do you guys think is going to get banned? All right, the actual ban list has been updated. What do we guys think? I was like, that was a wild time, and that was it was like a Wild West of message boards around that time, because people had an opinion for everything, even if they didn't ask. That was a big part of my college life, was just message boards and Yu-Gi-Oh, and getting able to travel around the place just to play a card game. But it was good. Like it got you out of the house. It got you out of your comfort zone, and it gives you lasting memories. And I think more than anything, that's what I appreciate Yu-Gi-Oh for the most, was that it gave me a lot of experiences. And then Cyber Dragon happened. So I think it was mid 2005, late 2006. I don't know if it was, I don't remember exactly when Cybernetic Revolution came out. That was the name of the set, where Cyber Dragon made its debut. And I'm not going to go fully into the details because this is not a documentary over how Cyber Dragon ruined the game. No, I'm kidding. I'm being petty. But when that card came out, again, it was the meta was shifted so hard, so fast over what that kind of card could do and what it brought to the table. And this was when I was slowly starting to fade out of the game. The dynamic of the game was changing dramatically, very fast. I think that, among everything else, is what caught me off guard, was just how fucking fast the game was changing. And at one point, I couldn't keep up. And it didn't help that around this time, it was 2007, 2008, where I left that first college because I wasn't getting anywhere with it. I was in between jobs. I was in between schools. I didn't have any money. And I was out of high school, and I wasn't surrounded by my high school friends anymore. And Russ and Jacob lived in a completely different part of the state than I did, so meeting up was not a possibility. On a whim, I had nobody to play with anymore. And at that point, it was, okay, it was just gonna put the cards away, and maybe one day we'll meet up again, and we'll play some other time. But during that time of not playing the game anymore, again, the game would drastically change, and I was completely unfamiliar with all of it. Like, I was not keeping, I did not visit Pojo anymore. I did not do any locals or regionals at that point. I just completely fell off of the game and just went back to video games, you know. Speaking of video games, there were a couple of Yu-Gi-Oh video games I did play around this time too. Well, not around that time, but earlier in that time, because it was something to kill the time. It was a way that I could experiment with deck possibilities without having to spend the money to get the actual cards. You have to spend the money to get the game itself proper, to be fair, but you can use those cards as an excuse to play the game in a digital format against some rock stupid AI. I think the only, I haven't played all of them. I only actually played a handful. I can count them in one hand. The first Yu-Gi-Oh game I ever played was EDS. It was Eternal Duelist Soul. I think that was the full name of that acronym. And then that was fine. It was pretty much Yu-Gi-Oh, the trading card game with some 8-bit chiptunes for a Game Boy Advance game. There was another one after that. I think it was Stairway to the Destined Duel, SDS. And the reason why you got these games among just having a digital playing field was because a lot of these games around this time and like the Shonen Jump weeklies that were released every month had promotional cards, and sometimes those promotional cards were a big fucking deal. The one I can immediately think of was Harpy's Feather Duster. I don't remember what set that came with, or what game, or what magazine that came with, but Harpy's Feather Duster was a big fucking get, and it was a promotional card. You had to get the game, or you had to get some sort of other piece of media to get that card. And that's why a lot of folks would get these, or at least buy them in bulk and sell the cards individually for exuberant prices because you're pieces of shit. I figured, all right, might as well play the game, and that's how I played those a bit. EDS did not play a whole bunch of. The one I put the most time into, and it's not great looking back, like it's aged like milk, was World Championship 2004. That was another Game Boy Advance game. There's a lot of Game Boy Advance games. But World Championship 2004 was the one I played the most. For anything, it's fucking phenomenal soundtrack. Eternal Duelist Soul and Stairway to the Destined Duel, their soundtracks were catchy, but they were kind of mini. They're minuscule, and I feel they didn't take full advantage of the GBA sound capabilities, whatever that means. But World Championship 2004 and 2005 to some extent too. I played that for a bit too. Didn't do it as well as 2004, but 2004 soundtrack was even to this day still remains one of my favorite pieces of Yu-Gi-Oh music for the entire franchise. I'm talking everything combined. I'm talking the anime, games, any sort of other multimedia that Yu-Gi-Oh is involved in. I love World Championship 2004's soundtrack so fucking much. So if you have the spare time, please listen to that soundtrack because it is fucking fantastic. I can't get enough of it. It was wonderful to hear it again when I was going back to the World Championship 2004 game for this video and getting to re-experience it despite fuck, this AI is so stupid. Why did they attribute a summon skull to summon a weaker Yugi? What the fuck, dude? What are you doing? Again, that game is aged like milk. The only other game that I remember putting some semblance of time into because it was a rental at first was Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. This was on the PlayStation 1. This game would get 2 sequels later. There was some names. It was really weird. It was Duelist of the Roses, I think it was, and I forgot the other name of the damn game. But little did I know, Forbidden Memories being a PlayStation 1 game, this game was made before the card game even existed. It was based off of the manga. It was based off Wizards and Dragons, or Wizards and whatever. I was gonna say Wizards and Warriors, but that's not right at all. What this means is that the card game just doesn't fucking follow the rules of the actual card game, and it gets pretty fucking bug nuts. Like, it's, again, great music, and the effects for the PlayStation 1 are actually damn good. It could be a really fast game, but the way monster cards, how you could fuse with different monsters based on their attributes, there's no polymerization needed, and that was how you were winning the game. So you had to know what kind of monster can fuse into what to make your phenomenally large beat stick to like really do the numbers. And then like equip cards were like something else entirely. They could also fuse with different cards or some other. It was weird, and I ain't like it. Okay? Because again, I was already well familiar with the card game around this time, and this was just not playing by the rules of the like official card game. So it required me to forget everything I knew for the most part to play this, and I couldn't fuck with it. It was like, nah, this is not for me. But again, I love Forbidden Memory soundtrack, and I know it has a bit of a cult following. I'm not sure about the sequels afterwards in the PS2 and GameCube. Forbidden Memories is the one I hear brought up the most, and I'd like to think that's for some benevolent reason. I don't know, maybe they hate the game as much as I do, but like the music just as much as I do. It should be said that I was also following the anime around this time, and like my experiences with Forbidden Memories, you could say, I was flabbergasted by what I was watching because I was not aware that like the earliest seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not talking about the season 0 shit. I'm talking about like seasons 1 and more mainly season 1, like the Duelist Kingdom era with Pegasus and all that sort of shit. That was based off of the manga, which again, it predates the actual card game. And I didn't know that at the time. So I'm seeing Yugi and guys like do all this sort of illegal moves with their cards. Like, these fuckers never played the game in their lives. Like, what do they do? You can't do that. You can't attack a field spell card directly. You can't. Can you destroy the rings around the Castle of Illusion thing with a catapult turtle? It was weird. But it was entertaining. I actually really ended up liking my time watching the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series. I would fall off around after the Leviathan arc because that arc bored me to tears, and I already sat through like the virtual shit, which I was like, nothing's fucking happening. But like the Battle City stuff remains some of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Television, and even now I will go back and watch a couple of those episodes and remember, man, fucking Yami Merrick did a lot of shit with his tongue that I don't think I've, like in any other fucking anime. This guy's a sexual predator. But after the Leviathan arc, I stopped watching the show. I did catch a couple of episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX when I was making the rounds. That was a completely different set of protagonists, though. I hear that show gets a lot better. After season 1, like season 2 and 3, I hear is actually decent writing, and not just in terms of just like being a show centered on a children's card game, but just as the show, the writing actually gets pretty good with its character arcs and shit. So I don't know, maybe that's a potential view for some time. Because the thing about this video, guys, is, and I probably should have said this like minute 1, it's not so much a look back at Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole. It's more about the trading card game. But I feel it's appropriate to mention what else I was consuming around this time to give full context of like my like or disdain of things that were Yu-Gi-Oh! And it was not just the card games. It was the video games I was saying. It was the anime. It was this really weird PC game that I think Elliot had at one point, where they got the voice actors for Yugi and Kaiba to voice scripted lines, but it was like Duel Monsters for children, like, or at least very young children, because the games for PCs that you can do next to nothing with cards. You just did it for the voice lines and other shit like that. But that was my life. Yu-Gi-Oh! For a good chunk of the early to mid 2000s was a large part of my life. And even though I've fallen off of the game so hard now, I always have those memories of that era, of that time. And that's why even today, like I still hold on to all this shit that I have. I've put like tons of B-roll over my voice throughout this video, and I've held on to all this shit. I'm a sentimental guy. I'm more of a sentimental guy now than I was back like 10, 12 years ago. I was like, oh fuck this, no, I'm in the now, baby. Like rub out the past. But like, as you get older, you start to have fonder memories of what originally seemed to be an easier time. So you want to hold on to it in some desperate ploy, just like maybe it'll go back to the way it was. But it won't, because that's life. But that's exactly why I hold on to all this shit, because everything here that I have is a relic of a happier time, a happier memory of when I really got into this game. And it's a part of why I sometimes attempt to go back into the game, even though I know for a fact I'm not gonna enjoy myself as much as I did then as I do now, despite like Yu-Gi-Oh! Being so widely available now in different platforms. Like one of the most recent games that they released was Master Duel. It's one of the best like versions of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've ever seen on a digital platform. Like this blows the Game Boy Advance games, the DS, the PSP games like out of the water with its presentation, with the kind of decks you can build, how you can just go at it. It is basically a digital version of the trading card game. If you don't want to spend money on getting cards and all that sort of shit, and who does? My biggest regret with collecting Yu-Gi-Oh! For as long as I have is amassing all of these junk cards, these commons, these pieces of cardboard that I'm pretty sure I can make a fucking tree out of. There's so many of them. And this is not even like all of them. Like if I had every single junk card and common that I've collected in like the earliest years of my heyday with this stuff, I could literally fill a whole fucking
garage with that shit. It was so bad. So if you want to avoid all that, you can just like play a digital version of the game. You can do Master Duel. There are also like third-party apps that I finally got to experience for myself just a couple of weeks ago. And it's like, this is insane. Like, this is great. This is the card game in digital format, and you don't have to spend a dime. You just want to just play the game with friends or online or randoms or whatever. You're playing the game, and you don't have to risk RNG with actual money. Maybe there are monetary options for this game. I don't know. I haven't really delved into Master Duel that much. I played a couple of games with a couple of friends, and I got my ass kicked because I'm old and I don't like the new stuff. But that's exactly why. To get into that real quick. Hold on, let me actually reset my camera real quick. I was going into this earlier about how the meta was changing so fast that I just couldn't keep up. The reason why I haven't gone back into it, because at one point earlier, this is a couple of years ago, I decided, you know what? Because Russ was telling me that he was getting back into the game because of this card shop that he visits, and they were running tournaments there, and it gave him reason to go out and give it a shot. So he started following the game again, and now he's way more into it than I ever was. Like, it's funny when I look back how it's like I was the one to introduce Yu-Gi-Oh to Russ, me and Jacob, and like me, he didn't have a semblance of how the game worked at times, and you needed to learn the rules. But now it's a fucking 180, dude. Like, he's way more knowledgeable of the game and the current meta than I ever will be. So it's funny. It's like, it's not exactly like the student has become the master, but it's more like I put more money into this game than you have. So he was getting back into it. So, well, if Russ is getting back into it, are we getting the boys back? You know, it's not exactly what happened, but it did get things going around again. And, like, the word started spreading. I was like, yeah, people are starting to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh again. It's like, we have the spare time. Do you want to try and give it a shot? Maybe see something that you like. And I went back into it, and I stuck with what I knew. Because again, my last deck that I made before leaving the game was my Apprentice Monarch build. I just like Monarchs in general for what they did. And then I learned that there was an entire deck type dedicated to Monarch, so I immediately gravitated towards that. And I still have a semblance of that deck somewhere around here. It's not very good because I don't know what half of these cards do, but that was exactly it. I was just unfamiliar with the environment that Yu-Gi-Oh is in now, and like since I left, there have been different types of monsters introduced. There are pendulums, which you put one here and you put one there, and the fucking field floods with monsters out of the women. There are also spell cards too. Then you got synchros, these white cards that could use like these tuners as material to become bigger monsters, basically fusions, without needing polymerization and all that. Then you had XZs. I think they're called XZs. It's XYZ. I was like, oh, like the dragon cannon of the purple fusion monsters. Like, no, it's a different XZs. But they were black cards that could also like be summoned by using monsters as materials. Like basically fusions. Like a lot of these were fusions without using polymerization. It's like, okay, like in essence they were very similar, but they had all sorts of different card effects. And then later there was Link monsters. I think those are the newest kind, I think, anyway. And you could like summon cards in the extra deck zone, and they have these arrows, they point, and they do different things based on what they're pointing at. And then fucking cards, magic traps, they have like paragraph long descriptions. And then old cards will start getting errated so that they do things that you didn't know that they did do in the first place, because their original formatting is kind of busted. Like, Ring of Destruction doesn't do what it does anymore because it's kind of broken, dude. So instead of just making a new card that is just an updated Ring of Destruction, they just errated the old card and hope to God that you know that for a tournament scene. Otherwise, judge! But that was me heading back into it. It was like, it's so different. Like, it is almost, not entirely, but it is almost a completely different game now. And I'm just a fish out of water. I'm so out of touch. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. Like, I got my buddy Ray, who was helping me with some Master Duels, and he's identifying all these cards. He's able to know all these effects off the top of his head because he probably plays a lot of it. He knows all these things. But it's like, what does that do again? Because the fucking description is a fucking novel long, and I don't can't commit all that to memory. That's why I felt like I was committing a lot of things to memory for every individual card of these new decks, and it was sensory overload. I couldn't take it, and that's why I don't find myself heading into the new era of the game as often as everyone else does, because I don't know what to do. And thankfully, there is, as I was talking about earlier, that GOAT format I was mentioning, where you can just play the game at a certain time frame around the first ban list. And that's what I'm more familiar with, and it makes me feel comfortable. That's the format that I often find myself playing with, and it's just, yeah, the deck variance is not as strong, but I am more familiar with this environment, so I feel more comfortable playing the game. But the thing that I love about current Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that there are so many deck types. There are so many different themes, gimmicks, that are all viable, but you really gotta know what these cards do. And these cards nowadays do so much. They do so much within each other that you can spend, and maybe you've seen it already if you played Master Duel, most of the first turns that I've seen, it's a game of fucking solitaire, where you're using combo 1 to combo 2 to 3 and 4, all the way to 17 to fill up the board, all before the first turn ends. And then the opponent gets a turn, and then they either counter if they can, or they build up their own board, and then something happens, I don't know. Because most of the time people will just scoop after that. Because games take so long. It's very different. And I want to stick by with it, I do, because we live in an age where everyone's on Discord, everyone's got a social media account. It's much easier to be in touch with one another. And for something like Yu-Gi-Oh! On a digital format especially, you always have someone to play with. And that's why I want to keep in the game, even if I'm vastly out of touch with everything that's happened. But, you know, I think that goes to show the sort of presence that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has left in my life over the last close to 2 decades. And that is crazy. And I don't know, maybe outside of Final Fantasy XIV, am I ever going to experience something like that just grabbed me like that and just gave me so many memories. Even if it was for like only a certain amount of years early on. Because again, my memories of Yu-Gi-Oh! Since its inception is more front-loaded than it is like back-loaded. But still, man, those are some great memories. Those are great times. And again, I would love to hear what you guys would say. Again, tell me where you started. Tell me what were your favorite decks to build. Do you still play the game, or did you fall out of the game? What are things that you love most about this series? Like, I want to hear that all in the comments, because that's what this video is all about. It's just a look back, a retrospective, a celebration of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG or the OCG. Maybe you're overseas. Maybe you play the Japanese meta or the Eastern meta. Again, it doesn't matter. The card game's a card game. So whatever you want to talk about, just leave a comment in the comment below and just go at it, because I love reading about that kind of shit. I also want to take this time to thank my friends and family over in Philadelphia. Close to a month ago, I flew down there to visit them, and knowing that I was going to make this video, I told them, hey, do you still have your cards? Sort of thing, because I want to film some Yu-Gi-Oh! B-roll for this video. And look at this picture right here. I think they were down for it. It was a blast. It was very heartwarming, very nostalgic to have a bunch of us all gathered around with our decks, our binders, all of our cards all together, and then just shooting the shit for a couple of hours, playing Duel Monsters, and just talking like we're back in high school again. That was definitely a highlight of 2022 for me. Like, outside of the Sonic movie too shit. But again, guys, if you happen to be listening and watching, thank you very much. That was a fantastic time, and I would love to do that again at some point. Maybe at a too many games, actually. We got too many games coming in June, and I'm guesting for that one. I'll make a separate video for that later. But yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys. It was very much worth the trip. So thank you. I love you all. And I'll end this video with going into their perspective on how they got into the scene of Yu-Gi-Oh! Themselves, whether it be from the card game, the anime, what have you, it doesn't matter. Everyone's got different stories to tell, and I think the perspective is pretty refreshing. So, I'll see you guys, as always, for the next video. Thank you all for watching. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask if you decide to go outside. Get vaccinated if it's possible. Have yourselves a fantastic night, and I guess get your game on. Or some other shit, I don't know. Doesn't work.
How I discovered Yu-Gi-Oh! The first time I discovered of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the toy commercials, actually. It was when they were promoting the Sagi the Dark Clown and Dark Magician action figures. So that's how I found out about Yu-Gi-Oh! Then my brother Stevie got the Yu-Gi starter deck. And that's when I learned about the card game. And then like after that, it was pretty much the rest was history. I started to learn more about Yu-Gi-Oh! Begging John to get packs for me, like where we usually go to. Those are always fun.
I actually discovered Yu-Gi-Oh! Right around the first episode when the first anime came out. Me, my friend Andrew, and my other friend Justin at the time, we actually went out and bought a single booster pack. So we tried to have a duel with 9 cards because we were fucking kids and didn't know any better. Eventually, we then bought structured decks, and from there, the collections just sort of grew and grew on and grew through. Particularly around like the Metal Raiders rule era, where I was, ironically enough, the counter duelist instead of Russ.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just went on from there to high school up until about somewhere around my college years, where I had to stop playing for a while because nobody else was near me to play.
How did I start playing Yu-Gi-Oh? Damn, it's been so long.
Wait, I thought I was playing Duel Masters.
Honestly, I mean, of course, the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. You know, Kids WB had it on Saturday morning cards. Saturday morning cartoons. So Duelist Kingdom knew it from there. Oh, no, I got it. Okay, Saturday morning cartoons. You get the darn game going. You're watching on TV, and then for Christmas, my mom got me a Lord of D Collector's 10. I have no idea what cards I got in it. I have no idea what it was, but I got those cards, and then my mom was like, "You have enough to build a deck, right?" Yeah, but I need more. And it went from there. So that's how it happened.
I was in college, freshman year. My good neighbors, Mr. John and his roommate Jake, were playing the game a lot, and he got me into the game. I was playing Magic the Gathering at that point for several years, so it was a pretty quick transition. And really enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot more. I liked that it was faster, and it wasn't like summoning sickness and all that stuff that you had to worry about. And yeah, it was a fun game.
Okay, so when I was back in the 3rd grade, I tended to be behind on the trends, so I started watching Pokemon after we were beyond Pokemon because it started airing on Cartoon Network.
Oh, Jesus.
But then Yu-Gi-Oh! Came on after it one day. I was like, whoa, this is cool. And it happened to be like right when the TCG came out, so I got the starter deck, started playing with friends. And at this point in elementary school, rules aren't a thing.
Yeah.
It's just like this guy defends this guy, he goes ahead of him, whatever. That's how it kind of always was growing up. No one ever wanted to play by the rules, which, you know, you're kids, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I was working at a game store at the time, game gallery, and our boss showed up with Yu-Gi-Oh cards one day for us to sell, which we were not a trading card place.
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, well, you'll do it. And I think we sold them for about a month or so before kids were coming in and actually wanting them. And so a couple of us at the store said, all right, what exactly is it? So they showed it to us, and then we watched them play a little bit, and then we each bought tins and we started playing it.
Just kind of fell apart.
It just kind of got sucked into it.
Okay.
I always saw like the anime like growing up. I wasn't like crazy into it at the time. I was purely all in on Pokemon at the time. But around 2018, I was visiting some family, and my cousin at the time was super into Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'm just like, you know what? I need a hobby. I'll pick it up. He gave me like a starter deck for like Dark Magicians, which sucked at the time because I had nobody to play with at the time because I was still living a couple states away. At around 2020 though, I was back visiting him again, and I then lived next to him at the point. So I'm like, okay, well now I can actually get into it proper. He then gave me a hero structure deck, which was a lot better, first of all, than the Dark Magician deck, because Dark Magicians back in the day were atrocious. With this hero deck, I started picking up, like, the fundamentals of Yu-Gi-Oh! The deck still wasn't good, mind you. It was just, like, get Shadow Mist on field, get Dark Law. But it was still good for figuring out the fundamentals of the game. So I then used that to just branch out into other decks.
I think my favorite deck that I always had was the Mobius deck that I usually played.
Mobius?
Yeah.
That's on Monarchs, basically.
Monarchs, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought it'd be kaiju. I know you were really big.
I do the Cosmo Kaiju deck currently, but for my favorite deck, it's always been the Monarchs.
I never really got into like the whole meta as far as, you know, I'm going to build this kind of deck and that kind of deck. You know, I'm from before GOAT format, basically.
Yeah.
So I basically just had my one deck. I had a couple other, like I tried a burn deck before, but really just a regular, I guess you just call them beatdown decks.
Yeah.
I guess that
Aggro.
just real brute force sort of. That's how I play my games.
High number good.
Yeah, exactly.
Counter Fairy. I still run that today, actually. Like, I really don't. I'm not a big person who runs meta, which is the
You
most.
were always anti-meta.
Yeah, I was never a big meta fan. Well, when I was in college, it stemmed mainly from just not having the money to build decks. And even as when I came back to the game later, I really enjoyed trying to beat all these decks, and you know, the people had just mastered against those matchups. And then I'd come in there with this matchup that people just didn't know what to do against, and you know, got a lot of wins over the years. So
Conceptually, I love the Elemental Hero deck. I know it's kind of cliche to use the protagonist deck from the show, but I think it's a fun deck. It's one of those decks where anything can happen. You can just look down at your field at any point, you have a poly in your hand, and be like, I could probably make something out of these.
Yeah, it's kind of like a wild card element to the heroes.
My favorite deck will always be Dark Magician. I took a break from this game 3 times, and each time I came back was because new Dark Magician support came back. First time I quit doing Inzektor format, that was a very stale format. And I came back during the Dark Illusion when Dark Magician got a huge wave of support. I took another break when I think Master Rule 4 was introduced with Pendulums. And I came back August 2020 because, well, pandemic sucked. And also I learned that there was a new card called Magician Souls that I'm like, well, I need this for my Dark Magician. And I've been playing again since then.
This is my current favorite deck I've made myself right now, but I'm still ironing out the kinks since we recently got support for it. The Triple D archetype playstyle. Yeah. Basically, it is where you summon it's where you start with like the weirdest and lowest looking weirdo monsters, such as slime balls and little ghost towers.
Like amoebas.
They do. And you end somehow on Mighty Kings from Hell, named after famous conquerors, or your other tech cards of choice, such as my favorite Appaloosa or Borreload Savage Dragon.
My favorite deck is Dragon Maids. It's a very fun, dynamic deck. Has a lot of tech options. It's very fun aesthetically. Speaking as a non-weeb, of course, I'm huge Chad. But yeah, it's just fun to just bounce around the dragons. Loses to everything in the game, but I mean, when you weren't getting cheesed by Nibiru, it's pretty fun.
Favorite Yu-Gi-Oh moment, like in general?
Yeah.
Going to my first tournament, actually.
Okay.
The first tournament that we went to was in Oxford Valley Mall. And like that was when they promoted it like on TV too. It's like, oh, there's this Yu-Gi-Oh tournament happening at Oxford Valley Mall. So it's like, if you want to go there, you know, this is where it's at. And then like going there is like, I got squashed.
Yeah. It was also like single round.
It was single round, yeah, but it was still a fun time. It's like I got my first tournament experience ever.
Yeah, it was mine too.
Yeah, so that's pretty much my most.
It was also in the middle of a fucking blizzard.
That too, yeah. But you know what? We made it. We went through it.
Tournament memory is probably the one I'll share the most. It was like the semifinals of a local Walmart tournament in college, and the guy I was playing against had like a face down. I kind of had him on the ropes, and I knew he had either a Sakuretsu armor or a Torrential Tribute as his back row, because that was the guy who ran all game. And I had a Chaos Sorcerer and a Karibo in my hand, and he had 200 life points left. So I special summoned the Chaos Sorcerer.
I know exactly where this is going.
I was debating what to do, and I'm like, we're gonna do it. And the guy, and when I summoned this Chaos Sorcerer, the guy said, okay. I'm like, okay, so it's probably the Sakuretsu because he would have activated the Torrential Tribute right there. And then I'm like, normal summon Karibo. He sacked the Chaos Sorcerer, and I hit him with Karibo for game. So that's, you already ran the card I was looking for. I just need another dark for the deck, and it was just
literally like
really silly.
Literally the finishing blow of the fuzzy testicle.
Exactly.
Your favorite memory of Yu-Gi-Oh? You look like you just saw your mom fucking a deer for a second.
High school.
High school. Yeah.
It was around the high school era, ironically enough. This was actually the gateway card to helping improve my social circle. An angel who played Yu-Gi-Oh! Introduced me to a greater circle of friends, who in turn led me to have Johnny introduce us to all the circle of friends, and then we all became a big circle of friends over freaking Nerd Poker.
Yeah.
And then we ended up just like and then we just ended up dueling our way through high school and stuff whenever we needed them to kill some downtime.
I wouldn't say that I have one specific moment. I mean, the thing that makes me happy is when I think about Yu-Gi-Oh was just hanging out with everybody. It was sitting around and playing games, and it was very interactive. It was a different kind of interaction. I was a video gamer for so long, and I never really got into trading card games. And Yu-Gi-Oh for me was always very welcoming. Whenever I encountered other people in the Yu-Gi-Oh fandom, everything was always really positive.
So my favorite memory of Yu-Gi-Oh was me and a group of friends who were playing a couple years back. We like to do a battle royale, which for those who don't know is just when you have like 4 or more people just dueling in all directions. So it's every man for himself. And we had like a joke card amongst our group called Sonic Duck, which is just a vanilla 1200 monster with a really goofy design, but like it was like our unofficial group mascot. And we were playing a duel one day, and the card that was played, I don't remember what it was called, but essentially the effect was that you can call the next card on top of your deck, you get to summon an Egyptian god monster. So as a joke, my friend was like, all right, I'm just going to say Sonic Duck. It was Sonic Duck. I threw my deck across the room. I was like, no way that just happened. And by some miracle, my deck stayed together in the corner of the room. I was able to pick it up and resume. But it was just hilarious. We were like, no way that just happened.
Something about just the raw, just creative energy that can come out of when you don't know how a card game works is really fun. Like, I enjoy like knowing how the game works properly. I also don't enjoy knowing how the game works properly because fuck the current meta. But I mean, when you're just having fun with friends and you just don't know what's going on, it's great.
The thing that got me to high school early the most was getting there an hour early to play Yu-Gi-Oh with my friends. This was all throughout high school. And I had to wake up at 5:30 to get to my high school. So I had to travel, but I got there early. We would spend the 45 minutes in the lunchroom playing it. We got known as the Yu-Gi-Oh kids and whatnot. It was lame by them, but we had fun all the time. So that's probably my best memory, is just hanging out with my friends early morning and sometimes after school.
He fucking took my favorite memory from the like, that was almost verbatim what I was gonna say.